part 2 of our series on Junipero Serra, patron of the Serra Clubs of the world and a very important figure in the history of the United States and of the Catholic Church. I'm using for my lectures material that I've taken from a book written by the Archbishop Emeritus of Birmingham, England. His name is Merville. And the book he wrote was The Man Who Founded California. Beautiful book. It's available through Ignatius Press. If you wish to get your own copy, just go on Amazon.com and you will find able to get this book. It's a very beautiful book, has some very beautiful pictures of the missions that he founded in California, as well as pictures of maps. It's a very well done book, and if you really want to have something for yourself or your family, or give as a gift to someone in the family, that might be a wonderful opportunity. So keep that in mind. As we ended my last section of our presentation in part 1, we ended with him becoming a Franciscan, and we have him going to Palma, which is the capital of Majorca, where there were schools of theology. And after a successful accomplishment there, he is promoted to be a professor of philosophy. So he must have been a man of deep intellectual ability, and so he pursues teaching philosophy in we call a seminary of that day. And he also starts to pursue another doctorate, a doctorate in theology. And in 1742, he is given what is called the chair of the Scotus Theology of the University of Palma. Scotus is a reference to a man by the name of Duns Scotus, a Franciscan of very great fame in philosophy and theology among Franciscans. So he is there as the theology teacher in 1742. In 1749, there is a call that goes out to the Franciscans that they are looking for missionaries who will work in Mexico, because it will be going to Mexico and to the mission effort in especially a place called Sierra Gorda in Mexico, that he will learn a lot about what he will apply to what we would call the Franciscan missions in California. But first of all, he has to get to Mexico, because that's where the major Franciscan thrust is in North America and in the Americas. It's right there in Mexico. You have to realize that the Franciscans were given the area of Mexico for their missionary work, whereas the Jesuits were in what we call today Baja California, and some of the other areas we'd call Arizona and New Mexico, where they had some of the Jesuit order that was doing missionary work. So the call went out, and it says, he writes that it was something like, oh, this is what I want to do. He said that his inner spirit had deadened with the preoccupation of being a professor in studies. There was something, he did a good job, but his heart wasn't into it, and this desire to do missionary work suddenly gripped him. Actually, he goes out as part of his job as a Franciscan. He must have been an excellent preacher too, because he's asked to do missions, not to go a missionary job, but we call it missions today. A priest comes to the parish for a week, spends preaching and teaching and hearing confessions and motivating people, inspiring them. So he was doing that in his own hometown of Petra. Now, it was interesting that he received word during that time that he was there in Petra, but for some reason he didn't tell his parents about this. It's a very interesting, I think I understand it. I think he knew that his parents loved his vocation. Maybe they also loved that he was in Palma, which was not that far from Petra. He was still on the island, Majorca. He was still with them. And I think it was very painful for him, and I think for them, to soon realize that their son would never return again. I mean, today missionaries fly back and forth. They'll have a vacation time every few years with their family. They can fly back from South America, from Asia, from Cambodia. I know a priest, actually one of my own neighbors, a young man, much younger than I, is a Marino missionary. I mean, he lived down the road from me in Cleveland, Ohio, and yet now he's in Cambodia doing missionary work. And he comes back every so often to visit his family. But that was not the day. When you went away, you almost you might never come back. I mean, it was almost a given, especially going to Mexico. You were not going to be probably coming back. He traveled to the Americas with a friend, a Franciscan called Francisco Paulo. Francisco Paulo was 9 years younger, and he was also a friar lecturer, teaching at the university there in Palma, at the University of Palma. But he also was a student, interestingly enough, of Serra. When he was a young student, Francisco Paulo had him as a professor. So there was a wonderful relationship between the two men, and they were on their way. Now, it's very interesting to note that Serra, at this point in his life, as he leaves Majorca to go to the Americas, he is 36 years old, and he has already halfway lived his life. He will only live another 36 years more in his life. So he's leaving his hometown, his home village, everything behind him, and is going to board a ship, I should say, that will take him from Cadiz to Puerto Rico, to Veracruz, and then he will walk from Veracruz to Mexico City, which was the headquarters for the Franciscans in Americas at that time, the 270 miles that it would be walking. It's very interesting that the cruise was a very interesting cruise because the cruise was captained by a Protestant, an Englishman for some reason, and maybe they got a good rate on the ship. So the Franciscans said, well, we are part of El Poverello, poverty. Poverty is our key as the Franciscans, so we're not going to bother spending too much money on your cruise. But this English-bound vessel had a rather nasty captain who loved to engage when he found out he had these Catholic priests on board, would love to engage on them because it was in those days, you remember, it's the confrontation still existed between Protestants and Catholics. And so he wanted to argue about the problems with Catholicism and the idolatry that you Catholics worship Mary. So they would get into these arguments between the two of them, and finally it's interesting. He once was bested in an argument, and he drew a dagger and put it to Junipero Serra's throat. And another time he threw himself upon his bed in baffled fury because Junipero would have an answer always for him, some answer from another part of the Bible. And he would just become so annoyed about the whole thing. Finally, he shut up. He got them where they were going, and they finally, you might say, made it by a number of cruises, number of ships. They were going from one point to another point. There wasn't one cruise ship, but a number of ships they would take before they would finally arrive in Veracruz. And the long walk, his first of those exceptional walks that he was to have made in the New World, would take place. It's very important to realize that he was not expected to walk, actually, because we're going to talk a little bit more about this, because he's really part of the imperial royal government. This is all part of a government program that got him there, was going to get him to be a missionary in Mexico. He had even access to a horse, which in those days was a great conveyance to take him there. But Junipero Serra said, no, a horse is too prominent. That's for warriors. We're simple friars. We will walk the 270 miles to Mexico City. And next section of our Hearts on Serra will take us to Mexico City and what happens there in Mexico City at the College of San Bernardino.